That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, last week when we did this episode, I feel like there was some pretty good vibes. We both felt really good about Alabama. Me, probably even more so than you, even though I know you felt good about them too. Let's start by, how do you feel about this team right now?
It's alarming what happened at Florida State. The loss is partly alarming. First of all, I don't think the loss in and of itself, or a loss to Florida State in Tallahassee, is some sort of sign that the world is ending, just simply because one thing we hadn't considered that we should have, or I should have at least, and probably we, and by we, I mean the media that covers Alabama, is that Florida State might be really good. Why that would shock anyone is a little crazy in retrospect. They were 12 and, people say Florida State, they're 2-10, they're 2-10. Well, they were 12-0 before they were 2-10. This is a national championship level program. Mike Norvell had before last year a fantastic reputation as a program builder and a good coach. And they got 16 starters out of the portal, most of whom were proven football players. They might not have been proven in the All-American sense, but they were proven. These were experienced fifth-year seniors, largely, that they got out of the transfer portal. We probably underestimated Florida State. So I don't think a loss to Florida State, let's say you lose 24-23, I would only consider that a little disappointing. But that's not what happened. The performance by Alabama was pretty embarrassing. I thought that there was a clear lack of effort at times. Let's not revise history and say it was for 60 minutes. That's not true. A handful of plays showed a lack of effort. The plan was disappointing. They appear to have no answers to deal with the zone read, RPO type stuff, and an athletic quarterback. That they appear to have extended their misery in terms of dealing with that. There was no answer there. And outside of the first drive offensively, which was masterful, by the way, the first drive was fantastic in terms of run, pass, balance, blocking, playmaking, time managing the drive. That was great. For the rest of the game, the offense pretty much gets an F. And other than Jeremy Bernard, who was a warrior. I'm very concerned about this team today. Last thing I'll say on where are we at today, but unlike others, I am not waving any sort of a white flag on this team or this season. Not yet. Not yet. It's too early for that. Now, when we have, a show, next Monday, that white flag could be going up the pole, but right now it's not. Right now it's not. I don't think it was a one-off Saturday, but I also think there's a possibility that Alabama turns this around. I'm still convinced this is a roster full of potentially very good football players.
Last year, first year under DeBoer, you knew Alabama was capable of being a really, really good football team, even with the deficiencies that they had. That first half against Georgia, and you go into halftime with a dominance, after a dominant half of football, you're probably going to take Georgia lightly in the second half. Even if they do turn it around and stuff, I mean, are they really going to be able to overcome based off of what we're doing to them, especially offensively versus them defensively? Are they going to be able to overcome this deficit they put themselves in? We're probably pretty good. They showed dominance against LSU on the road in Baton Rouge. Was LSU a perfect team? No, but they were a really good football team, and they dominated them. So then you got to ask yourself, well, then how does Oklahoma happen? How does Vanderbilt happen? Which, by the way, if Vanderbilt was in the ACC like Florida State is this year, that's an 8 or 9 win football team, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So when we say Florida State is, a potentially an 8, 9, I don't know that I go 10, but at least probably an 8 or 9 win team, that's in the ACC. So I would view them in some ways. I think they are a little bit better than Vanderbilt was last year, but I don't think it's drastic. I just think, and when you look at Vanderbilt, they did lose to Georgia State, which is just an embarrassing loss. But then, you have Missouri, top 25 team, Alabama, Texas, South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee, a lot of playoff teams, a lot of top 25s. So, It's just that they were playing in the SEC and it was a tough league. But this is the part that going into this year, I think one of the problems that they had last year was they took teams lightly. The preparation wasn't where it needed to be. And we do know based off of them saying, hey, we kind of turned our attention. I think it was the Tuesday or Wednesday is when classes started. They turned their attention to Florida State preparation, if I'm not mistaken. FSU said that they have been doing stuff to prepare for Alabama since January. One of their players mentioned that. So, and not saying that that's what you have to do, but what I'm saying is that I don't know that Alabama realized they were going to run into what they ran into on Saturday. What's going to kind of piss me off, speaking candidly, is if we see them against we really probably won't know against Louisiana-Monroe or Wisconsin, but if they go into that Georgia game and they look like first half last year, not saying that they get up by that much or anything, but I'm saying they look super competitive. It's just going to confirm to me, you do this when you feel like it. When you feel like that a team is worthy of you giving them all of your attention. What I'm hoping is that any sort of hot seat that might be heating up for Kalen DeBoer causes him to take every game like the top games, and that maybe you start seeing consistency in performance against everybody as a result of that. That will also come with questions later if he gets himself off of the hot seat, if he corrects that. But in the meantime, I'm just curious to see how they respond at this point, because you are right. A lot of what Alabama did wrong, it's fixable. But the effort and, in my opinion, the game planning, and guys just still didn't look comfortable in this Kane Wommack defense. These are issues that are very concerning, and I'm just curious to see how they address it and how they try to fix it.
I've been working on a theory, and you may shoot this down. Feel free to shoot this down if this gets super silly, because there's nothing I despise more than silly theories. When I read them from somewhere, if I read them somewhere else, I completely dismiss them. When I come up with them myself, I'm like, this is great. So shoot this down, but it addresses what you just said. I'm just kind of wondering, Kalen DeBoer is a good football coach. He is. You can't tell me he's not. I remember when he was hired, I said, I don't know if this is going to work at Alabama. I don't know. But I know we hired a good football coach. That's proven. It's done. We're not going to see if he's a good coach. He is a good coach. He's won everywhere he's been. He's won big everywhere he's been, and not in the same environment. Different environments, 3-4 different places. He's won big. He's a good coach. That doesn't mean it will work at Alabama. Similar to like same basketball, Anthony Grant, who won before he got to Alabama, didn't win at Alabama, but he's winning now, per the standards that is the place he's at. So if DeBoer is not working out at Alabama, why? Why did it work everywhere else and wouldn't work here? Well, maybe this is silly, but it gets to exactly the point Clint was making. At Sioux Falls, who was he coaching? He wasn't coaching, just to name two names, James Smith and Quay Rousseau, not at Sioux Falls. He was coaching self-starter kids. Those kids are dying to continue to play football because football's going to end for them in just a couple of years. It's the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th grade football. This the high school players that kept playing high school football. And I don't mean that insulting. I mean, just it's not anything like the SEC. It's not pro football. That's what the SEC is. And then he goes to Fresno. They don't have Quay Rousseau and James Smith. They hope to have 3 stars that were looked at by bigger programs, but not offered. Again, self-starters. You didn't have to I think coaching kids at Alabama is different. It's different. It's not easier. You're dealing with a different kid. It's a different kid. And others might be able to articulate that better than I can. But if we're asking why isn't this working, or if there comes a day when Kalen DeBoer leaves and it just didn't work at Alabama, my theory is going to revolve around something like that. It's just different. And it's not different. I don't mean to be one of these Alabama put on a pedestal things. It's different at Georgia. It's different at Tennessee. It's different at LSU. It's different at Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan. Those jobs are all different than what he has done at Sioux Falls and Fresno, and then even Washington. When you say, well, Washington, he had dudes. He did have dudes. It was closer to Alabama. But let's be honest, even though they're playing for a national championship, their roster 1 through 85 in Alabama. He dealt with a handful of the type guys that he's got at Alabama, a handful, maybe 10, maybe 20. Hey, 25 of them's enough. You can go all the way to the playoff with 25 Alabama kids. I'm just saying, I guess, and I'm wondering if that's why they're up for the big games and not up for these games when they're big favorites, because he didn't have to motivate the kids at Sioux Falls to play. They were busting to play on Tuesday. They loved to play football because they got to keep playing football. They're not future pro players. So is too much of that silly, or it's probably in the ballpark?
I think that's in the ballpark. And to add on to that point, you've a lot of what Washington had, that what you would call Alabama caliber, was development. It wasn't, they brought in a bunch of 5-star guys who were entitled coming in. It was guys who still had that hunger. And so they just kept having that hunger. It's why I do think adding some of those lower rated guys who you see something in them, but they're not getting the respect that they deserve, and they come in ready to work. I think there's a balance there that can really help your football team.
Bernard, Cuevas, and Brailsford were not highly recruited guys.
That's right.
They were Division I dudes, but they weren't. They weren't. I keep using Quay Rousseau and James Smith for no reason whatsoever, but they weren't Quay and James out of high school. That's a great point you made, that these weren't. I don't even think someone's going to have to. Someone in the comments can show how wrong I am. I don't think Roma Dunze was Roma Dunze until he was in Washington.
No, he was a 4-star guy. I want to say he might have been in the top 200. He was somewhere, if I'd have guessed, between 150 and 250. I've looked before.
Penix was going to Tennessee and was dropped. I mean, people don't talk about that because it's kind of rude, but he was dropped. And then it goes to Indiana, and so not even the superstar quarterback was Ty Simpson or Keelan Russell. And hey, DeBoer's done. Hey, give him this credit, and I'll be the first to give him credit. He had never done this before, and the dude racks up 5-star commitments. They had never done this before. He had never been in a place where you could sign those guys, and boy, he took like a duck to water to that. I mean, he kept recruiting at a Saban level. The thing that people thought, well, he can't recruit, he can probably coach. Looks like he can recruit. I'm not sure about the other thing.
Well, I think that's probably one of the more underrated elements of the Nick Sabans and the Kirby Smarts. It takes a special kind of coach, not only to get those guys in your program, but you're asking a 5-star guy who was being courted by everybody. Everybody was begging him, and he's a rock star and a superstar stepping on the campus as a recruit, signs on that dotted line, gets to Tuscaloosa, and now he's got to play special teams, if anything. He's got to sit and wait for a few years. He's got to have a reality check, and managing those types of egos is very difficult to do. But Nick Saban has such a demand about him that, if he tells you, first of all, when he tells you something, you trust it. And so I think he can break through with a lot of these and I think Kirby is much that same way. Good coaches are. That could be, something, whether it be an adjustment period, whether it's something that he can't handle, that time will tell on all that. But Kane Womack has no experience with that either. None. He was in Indiana. He was at South Alabama. He has spent some time in the SEC. He's probably been around it, but being one of those guys that everybody turns to, that's different. But yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And it's something where you got to question, okay, is this an adjustment period, or is this just who Kalen DeBoer is and the staff is? And we, as much as I've praised him, you got to be able to say something's not adding up. Yeah. And from I think there's scheme problems, but I think when you talk about, I don't think that I think guys are pretty bought in. I don't think that everybody would just completely BS that. And now here's the thing: do they continue to buy in? Because right now the criticism and everything else, they are getting hammered. And I do think Florida State, they had some miscast. They made some incorrect moves last year, but 2-10, in my opinion, was the result of guys not buying in at all.
Not buying it. Yeah, no, that's right. And what happens when you change out your starting lineup every year? They had 16 new starters this year. That's why people doubted them. Like, they got 16 new starters. No way they're going to be good. Yeah, they had 16 fifth-year senior guys who'd played a lot of football. And one last thing I'll say about DeBoer before, people think I'm too critical of Kalen DeBoer. I just want what's best for Alabama. That's all. I want what's best for Alabama. I don't care who the coach is. I want what's best for Alabama. But I'll say this, in my opinion, the best case for Alabama in terms of who should be the head coach for Alabama in 2029, Kalen DeBoer. That's the best case. That's what I would love to see happen. Is like you said, this is an adjustment period. Him learning how to reach and coach the types of kids you have at Alabama. And that took a while. And maybe one day we'll be saying on this show, also in 2029, I hope, that one day that wow, there was an adjustment period, but once he figured it out, he figured it the heck out. That would be the dream for Alabama. Is the dream isn't let's just stick a line in the water and go fishing for somebody else. History dictates that's not a great way to build a football program. Change out the coach every time he goes 5-5 in 10 games. Change him out. That's not a good way to do this. But I hope he turns around. Rooting for him. One thing everybody says about Kalen DeBoer, and I think it's a good thing, is he's a great guy. Everybody likes him. The players like him. If y'all don't get that, the players like him and they like playing for him. Now that doesn't matter because it's a results business, but the players like him. There's no reason for the fans not to.
That's exactly right. And they like him. In fact, I would go as far as to say a lot of them love him.
Yes.
The only question that is even remotely being asked right now with that is, do they respect him? And I think that they do, but that is a fair question because, and here's the thing. This is why I say, Nick Saban, he would be harder on guys during these types of weeks. And if anybody, we were talking, Florida State's a 2-10 football team. They weren't very good last year. And you're kind of expecting them just to be a stepping stone on your way to the college football playoff. Nick Saban would take extreme offense to that, and he would make sure that his players didn't buy into that whatsoever. I almost think that the coaching staff is viewing it in the same way as the media and fans, where, hey, Florida State's not, I'm not saying that they were disrespect Florida State to the degree they might be or might not be. I guess it depends on the results from this past Saturday, but for Louisiana-Monroe, I'm not saying they were putting them in that same, but it does feel like when everything's going well and we're all singing, Alabama's praises, and it's kind of like, man, you got Auburn next week, but Oklahoma's not great. You need to be focused on Oklahoma. You're going into, and there's elements where it's like, man, we definitely should have seen that coming. That head coach is a really good defensive minded guy. You got a hostile environment at that defense's back. Maybe Alabama might have some problems.
And you're in the media. We knew this was coming. Every Monday, a Monday Saban press conference the week before they play a game where they're a 40-point favorite, some unlucky dude in the beat crew was going to get picked on, yelled at, and humiliated because Nick had to get upset and scream about someone taking the game lightly. And he wasn't talking to the poor guy that works for the Decatur newspaper or the poor guy that works for the Montgomery Advertiser. He was talking to his football team. That's who he was screaming at. And it would happen the Monday before they were playing a game in which they're a heavy favorite because Saban had that all figured out. And it's not crazy that Kalen DeBoer, it never occurred to him on the Monday before game at Sioux Falls that he had to talk to his team through the media and yell at a beat guy because he had to keep his team up because, here comes Kansas Teachers College.
Yeah, I have been concerned all week. I don't like at all that it does not look anything like we were expecting. That bothers me to my core because I'm wondering what in the world could have possibly went wrong for it to look this way. And that's something that, we'll have to see what they do moving forward. But for anybody concerned, I understand it.
Yeah. Some of it's just sports. I know people like listen to this show, hate hearing that it's just sports. But U.S. Open's going on right now in tennis. Hey, sometimes the number one player in the world loses to the guy ranked 68th. and that just happens. It's sports. It doesn't always go like you think it's going to go. And everyone listening to this show played some sort of sport at some point in their life. You didn't play your best all the time either. And it wasn't because you didn't try. Sometimes it's because you didn't try hard enough, and sometimes it wasn't prepared enough. Sometimes it just is sports. The Braves won the World Series in 2021 and were a much better team the next 2 years and didn't win the World Series. But that's sports.
That something, Jimmy, I have a problem with the schematics where you've got a linebacker coming off of a devastating knee injury, 9 or 10 months removed. You're asking him to go from mugging in the A gap to getting into the flats to cover for a blitzing corner when they're doing a clear out wheel combination. And you're asking Deontay Lawson at, what is he, 70%, 80%? I mean, he's nowhere close to 100%. I don't care what anybody says.
Agreed.
Which is to be expected. You know, we have this concern going in. This really didn't catch us off guard. But these are the things, it's like, you can't do that as a coach. I understand that Dijon Lee is a guy who had earned his snaps on the field through his performance in practice, through his work ethic, and they trust him. And I get that. But with it being snap, you know, 3rd and long, 3rd and 11 situation, and you're rolling to a single high cover 3 look, or really actually it was cover 1 robber, and you're asking him to play man on Squirrel White, who is a sub 4.4 linebacker, or excuse me, wide receiver.
Was that his first snap?
It was either his first snap, second snap. It was something.
We get so excited to see these true freshmen and during all summer. And then there's the cold reality. Are we really going to ask this guy who just got off the bus to cover Squirrel White on a go route in his second snap in college football? That's on the coaches. That's not on Dijon. That's just not on him.
It's not.
It's not on him.
And that's kind of my point, in that I feel like players are not being put in a position to consistently be successful. That's going to happen every once in a while with a coach, but it was consistent in the season opener against Florida State. And that's where you've got to stop and be not stubborn and set in your ways and say, I need to change some things up to help my guys, because I may be asking, like Deontay Lawson. Think about this, Jimmy. This is a lateral moving offense. It gets you moving east and west. It's the entire reason that the linebackers weren't working downhill. A lot of people were saying they were playing on their heels and playing flat-footed. To an extent, I think that's true. That's also what they were being coached to do, is to let the offense, you know, the mesh point and everything else, let the ball be established before you react and start working your way downhill. First of all, I hate that with an absolute passion. But also think about this. You do have 3 linebackers, which are the big 3, the ones that are going to play. One of them is 70%, 75%. Another one is a downhill thumper, very good at run fits, very good between the tackles in the Kyle Green. And then Justin Jefferson, who's got all the sideline speed that you could ever want. But from a mental aspect, probably, you know, he's not going to be an X's and O's guy to the extent of like a Deontay Lawson. That's the combination of linebackers that you're putting on the field against Florida State. And you've got them trying to work laterally, and you've got them thinking too much. I mean, sometimes you just got to get downhill and bust some guys in the mouth, and you might let something pop as a result of that, but they're going to feel your presence, and they're going to know one thing about this game is you're not taking the fight to us. We're taking the fight to you. And if you bust something off of it, great, but someone's going to pay for it. You know, if it's the quarterback and he's on a zone read, I mean, if it's him paying for it, if you want to keep running that, that's fine, but he's going to keep getting tagged. You know, it's like this mentality that I think's being lost in trying to outsmart opposing offenses. And that bothers me to my core.
Sometimes you just need to, you know, lock the gates and fight and just beat up the other guy because he's playing chess. You know, like it's a sports thing, right? They're playing chess and we're playing checkers. How about this? Let's play UFC. The chess guy's not going to outsmart the UFC guy who just flips up the board and pulls a John Wick on everybody in the room. I mean, and like you said about outsmarting, hey, just be more physical. Just be more physical than the other team. That often works. I remember Chris Samuels long time ago reading an article when he was being quizzed as a rookie playing for Washington back in, you know, forever ago. I guess this would have been like 2000. and they were going over the playbook, and it was a conversation, and they said, okay, what's your assignment here? What's your first assignment? And he tells them, okay, if that doesn't work, what's the second thing you do? And he tells them, and if that doesn't work, what's the third thing that you're supposed to do? And he tells them, he gets that right. He goes, and what's the fourth thing? And he says, there is no fourth thing. Just hit everything I see. I don't think we do enough of the fourth thing when we get confused, and just be more physical and don't do as much thinking, as Clint said. And one last thing I'll say about his point, talking about how I do think something I missed or something I should have. I think inside linebacker is a bit of an issue, and I didn't really think of or talk about it enough this summer because Deontay is hurt. And Justin Jefferson's not the biggest kid in the world. And I think he's really good at some things and maybe not as good as others. And Nikhil Green is new to the SEC in this level of physicality that you get in the SEC that you don't get in the Big 12, or certainly not at Charlotte where he was before. And, when the other team scouts you, I think some fans hear the other team scouting you and they think it's all X's and O's. Often what they're really trying to do is identify individual players they can take advantage of. And I know this conversation happens sometimes when you're close, when a coach is close to somebody on the other staff and the game is over. The game's over. You can call them Sunday. They've been game planning against you for months. And this is one of your good friends that you've known forever. And you can call and the conversation goes something like, what did y'all see? What did y'all see when you came up with that game plan? What did y'all see? And the first thing they'll say is, we didn't think Tim was very good. We didn't think 41 was a good player. And then they come up with things to attack that. That's what scouting is. It's not just about, boy, Alabama doesn't do a good job on the RPO. No, they're looking for players they feel they can take advantage of. And at Alabama, that almost sounds like Greek dust. Like, well, we got nothing but 5 stars out there. But no, every player has some sort of flaw. And the good scouts, they're looking for players they can take advantage of.
Was Florida State, did they know Alabama was sending a corner blitz on that will? Probably not, but they were trying to get Deontay Lawson covering that, and they got it. They noticed that the true freshman was playing to the wide side of the field and probably wasn't expecting Tommy Castellanos to be able to go vertical and make that throw. So you've got cover one robber where you've got Zay Mincy rolling to middle of the field coverage where he doesn't have necessarily – he's rolling away from where the ball was thrown, so it's not like he's going to be able to redirect and get back out there. I actually think he showed him very impressive range considering, and he almost did get there. But, he was a few steps short, and it's like that is even in the moment. You can, getting Chris Brazzell, for Tennessee on an undersized Mac at Husky last year. That's something that's happening in the moment during the game where you say, ooh, we got something here. Let's take advantage. That is coaching. You're 100% right. I don't think Alabama's doing that enough. Now, granted, in this type of game, you're reacting more than being proactive and trying to identify where you're strong. You're trying to figure out how to stop what they're doing to exploit you. But that's, once again, that's where you got to question the coaching, at least to a certain extent. And it's something that they got to get fixed. I know that we've harped, it's Wednesday. We're still talking about Florida State. Last year, everybody got upset because we were still talking about Georgia on Wednesday and Thursday after a very impressive performance. This is kind of the same thing. It's probably time to move on. But, the fact that this is the first time we've been able to get on here, and I feel like we can kind of get into the weeds a little bit more. But also, some of these problems go beyond Florida State. And so, I think Nikhil Green is going to put up a hell of a performance if he's asked to shoulder the workload against Wisconsin or probably even Georgia. These types of offenses like you saw on Saturday, you're not going to see them too often. But we know at this point they're going to be a problem for Alabama. So when you hear about them going against, I don't care if it's Louisiana-Monroe. If they run this style of offense, understand there's going to be some struggles. USF cause problems. They're all going to cause problems. So, that's something to at least keep in mind.
Teams will stress that part of their teams will stress the part of that. Maybe that's not what they do full time. Maybe they're like, hey, we got this as part of our playbook. Let's say Monroe's plan is to run that sort of stuff, 10, 15 times a game. They're running like 30 times a game against Alabama, when they watch the tape. They'll kind of do what Oklahoma did, a year ago and just sort of really emphasize that part of what they do because they know we struggle with it. And I hate saying this, boy, when has Alabama ever worried about Vanderbilt weeks ahead? But right now, I put the over under on forcing Vanderbilt punts in that game at 2.
That feels like a safe assumption. I mean, honestly, like when you think about it, and that's going into Bryant-Denny Stadium, you got the revenge factor compared to last year. There's a lot of reasons to like Alabama in that football game. But one thing we know is Alabama, until they prove otherwise, they're going to struggle against this style. And I say this style, there's variations of it. It doesn't all have to look the same. I think that's where I screwed up with, this game in particular, is everybody wanted to compare it and the veer element of it to like a Vanderbilt last year or some of the things that even Oklahoma did against Alabama. And it's not the same thing. But I do think that anytime you add a quarterback that brings a playmaking element to the field and he has the ability to cause problems, on the ground as far as extending, a lot of his was through the air, though. We've talked about that. Any sort of playmaking ability at the quarterback position on top of a mobile element, and then you have guys like one thing about Florida State that we didn't give them enough credit for is they got some dudes, some different guys that you can build around as far as doing different things. They have the Ontario McCaleb type of player in Jalen Lucas, who's going to be that speed demon, kind of undersized for a lot of offenses, but he can cause you a lot of problems. We didn't give Florida State nearly enough credit with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's right. And you're right about the variations, and it's not all identical. I mean, some people might look identical. It's not identical. Florida State didn't run the same offense that Vanderbilt does or the same offense Oklahoma does. They just do concepts that seem to work against Alabama too consistently. And if we're just going to make it simple, let's just make it simple by saying really athletic quarterbacks are scaring the heck out of me from this point forward. And Castellanos should have been, all we could talk about was his quotes. We should have been talking about the fact, he had a really rough year at Boston College when they switched to a drop back offense. They switched to a drop back offense. He couldn't do it. Bill O'Brien's not changing who he is for this guy. He's doing his offense. Dylan Lonergan is a fit with what Boston College and Bill O'Brien wants to do. And I think we're like, boy, he stunk at Boston College. No, he stunk in a drop back offense. The year before, when they built it around what he does, I believe he was second in the nation to Jalen Milroe in runs over 10 yards. We should have been talking about that and not his disastrous half season at Boston College because he couldn't run the Patriots offense.
Tommy Castellanos is not Tom Brady. That fact has not changed even after his performance on Saturday.
He threw the ball 14 times. 14 times.
That is, by the way, that is wild.
And beat Alabama.
Averaged well over 10 yards an attempt. Over 150 yards passing on 14 attempts. So they picked their spots extremely well. They attacked in the right places, and Alabama, just for whatever reason, they struggled with it. And so for anybody that is concerned about Alabama, I'm not really going to defend at this point. In the past, it's been like, well, I think they're going to be okay. And I do think they're still going to be a good football team. I still think that the problem is that some of this stuff you can't assume is getting turned around, because I assumed all offseason it was getting turned around from 2024, and it did not, at least not in week 1. And so why in the world would I keep banging my head against that wall, assuming it's going to change? If they show me, then we'll start addressing that, we'll start reacting to it rather than expecting it. Don't expect, appreciate, I think is what they say. I'll appreciate it when it gets here, and I'll stop expecting it. But let's talk a little bit about Louisiana-Monroe. Obviously, this is not something, we're not going to dive into the weeds here. This is a lot of spread principles, a lot of RPO principles, a lot of 11 personnel. But, Jimmy, what are you looking for on Saturday against Louisiana-Monroe? What's like one of the number one things, and we'll go over multiple, I'm sure, but what's like the number one thing that you would like to see, whether it's a reaction to Saturday and maybe you want to see them improve something, or maybe it's something that, maybe they didn't get going or whatever. What's like the number one thing you'd like to see on Saturday?
I know this is too elementary and it's too obvious and it's too simple, but it just needs to be said after last Saturday, and that's win the game. Win the game, find a way to win. If some reason it goes poorly again, Find a way to win the game. Deal with the boo. If you only win by 3 points, deal with the boos later, but find a way to win the game, whether it's 7-6, 10-7, 12-10, or 63-3. Find a way to win the game and come out of it 1-1. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, secondly, obviously that's something that should happen. Alabama's a 36-point favorite. My second thing is, and I rarely pay attention to this or think that it's important, but this week I think it might be, and that is, if you want everyone to start feeling a little better about the football team, cover that number. Cover the number. Vegas says 36 or 36.5. Cover the number. And for fans out there, if they do cover the number, you don't have to get back on the train, but a polite golf clap would be nice. I mean, let's not get to the point as fans where we deride accomplishment. When the kids accomplish something good, they deserve at least polite applause. So cover the number. That's a good performance. No matter if Alabama wins 37-0 or 57-20, if you cover that number, that's a good performance, period. Now, I'll let you get a little deeper in the weeds in terms of what you would like to see Alabama specifically do on offense and defense. But I think in the macro sense and the big picture sense, after what we saw last week, first and foremost, win the game, and B, play well enough to cover that number and get everybody clapping at the end of the games again.
I want to see some damn pride. I want to see some guy. I want to see you're up. You've given up 0 points to Missouri, and you're putting starters back in on the goal line because you want to maintain that goose egg. I want when if a running back breaks out of the right side, I want the backside corner hauling his ass all the way until he's tackled. I want the 315-pound defensive lineman turning around, and there's no way you're catching him, but show a little bit of effort and say, until he crosses that goal line or until one of my guys catches him, who is fast enough to get down this field and catch him, I'm not going to stop running in that direction until he's tackled. That's going to be, you got to be in good condition to do that, but act like you care. I never want to turn on the tape because if you would have said, Clint, who's the one player you can bank on where they won't be able to find a lick of that on tape going into this game, I'd have said Bray freaking Hubbard.
Yeah.
He would have been my number one.
Yeah.
You ain't seeing that from that guy. And that was, I think that might, out of everything, and I'm not trying to be hard on him at all because I think he is a great player. I don't think Saturday was a representation of who he is as a player at all. And that's kind of where I look, and I don't understand. What was he under the weather? Was he a little bit banged up? So I can't tell you, and it was. I mean, sometimes when just someone's taking it to you, man. Sometimes I've been there before too, but it's something wasn't right, and I just would have never expected that from him, and so I never want to turn on the tape and see, and it's not just from him, but I said on Twitter, if you're going to point out the bad, point out the good, because Zabian Brown, on the flip side of that, he was going 110 miles an hour every chance he got. And that's the guys that you want to build around. And Bray Hubbard is one of those guys. And so I just want to see him play like that. And I want to see the rest of these guys play like that. And that is one thing. You can control that. And if I see any of that at any point in 2025 after the ridicule and the criticism and probably what they claim they got watching the tape from the coaching staff, if that is an issue again for anybody, I will say this entire thing is a lost cause because you can't, you have been challenged. That is something that is so much in your control. You can't control the style of offense. You can't always control the plays that their guys are going to make, but you can control your own effort level. And when you've been challenged to do that and then you're still unable to do it, that is a problem that I don't know is that you're going to be able to fix.
Under Saban, there was kind of this pattern of, and I'm sure as I say this, people are going to be pointing out exceptions to the pattern, but I don't mean 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, didn't it often feel like Alabama would play a big game in week one and under Saban usually win? And last year under DeBoer, by the way, they won the opener 63-0. I know it was Western Kentucky, but they they played well in the opener because they're excited to play first game. But there's been a pattern of playing well in the opener, and then week 2, you play a group of 5 team, some lesser group of 5 team that you're a big favorite over. But now it's week 2. The excitement of the new season has worn off. You're a 5 touchdown favorite in week 2. And it seems like Alabama just hadn't played well in those games. Last year it was South Florida, a group of 5 opponent. They didn't play well. And that seemed common. I'm hoping that what we see Saturday is a little flip. Maybe last week was the week 2 performance, and this week we get the week 1 performance, and it'll feel a little bit like a reset. Be excited like they were against Western Kentucky a year ago. Be excited to be out there. And like Clint said so well, effort and energy and juice, that's, the lowest man on the totem pole can do that, but we need it from the best players. And I would like to see Alabama's best players have big games. The best players. I don't normally say that about when you play a Monroe, but I think if Ryan plays, I don't know if he will. My guess is he won't, but if Ryan plays, big game. Another big game from Germ. Ty, play great. One of the backs, go off. And I do feel, by the way, here's just a bold prediction. I'm going to predict 2 home runs from the running back crew. Two home runs on Saturday. One of them probably from Kevin Riley, who's probably the best home run hitter they got back there. But I'll predict 2 home runs. Best players, Proctor, Brailsford, play well, play great. I mean, play your Georgia game against Monroe. You need to, because you got some critics in the stands now that are looking. If you only win 28-10, you're gonna hear about Monday is going to be as bad as this Monday was. When you quote only win 28-10 against an opponent you're favored to beat by 36. But I do, in terms of what I want to see, just real quickly, commitment to the run game. Couple of home runs from the running back crew. Ty Simpson continuing a streak of starting a game with no interceptions. How about that? There was some positives. Another game from Ty with no turnovers. And defensively, what I would love to see, I hope it's not too much to ask, what I would love to see defensively, I know some people think I'm about to say shutout. No. What I would like to see defensively is Monroe about halfway through the second quarter clearly realizing offensively we have no chance to win this game. And I've seen Alabama do that to teams that they really outman. You can watch them and tell they're so excited to play in Bryant-Denny. They're so excited to get this opportunity. And then you look at their body language in the second quarter, and they fully realize we have absolutely no chance to win this game. And that's what I would like to see from the Monroe offense in the second, as soon as the second quarter of, well, we're not scoring much today.
There was a point for Utah State a couple of years ago where it's exactly what you're talking about. They knew they didn't have a chance at all, and they pretty much, the way they were trying to end that game and get out of there with a paycheck, and it was so painfully obvious. MTSU, they got destroyed, but they didn't really play that way. They played with their hair on fire defensively. To your point, though, and if something I hadn't thought about, when's the last time Alabama had a good week 2 performance? Because last year was USF. And that was nasty. And just, it wasn't until late where you pulled away. Year before, you played terribly against Texas at home, lose by double digits. The year before that, you go to Austin, and yes, you get a win. But we all knew how gross and nasty that game looked.
Bryce won that game.
Bryce Young won that game.
Single-handedly won that
Even
game.
Will Anderson looked overwhelmed in that 2022 matchup. So, I guess Mercer was the year before that, and they won pretty big. I don't really remember how that game looked, but it's been a while since they had like a statement week 2. It's also been a very long time since they lost week 1. So I guess, the bounce back has to start this week. And granted, Aiden Armenta, which is their quarterback, not a great thrower of the football. Now, granted, I said that, that I think Tommy Castellanos in the short to intermediate parts of the field is actually pretty good. Question is deep ball accuracy. Limited sample size, but he certainly showed me on that. But Armenta he's a good runner. Mm-hmm. They're not going to run their offense anything like what Florida State's going to do, but they're going to try to get him involved in the run game. They got another quarterback that they might end up playing some. Really good on the ground this past week. They got a South Alabama transfer in Braylon McReynolds, and he was, over 110 yards on 10 or 11 carries. So he averaged like 10 yards a carry. Was also involved in the passing game. I think he had a receiving touchdown. But just like this personnel and stuff, I mean, I think Louisiana-Monroe, they do have a lot of deficiencies. But it's more, this isn't really about Louisiana-Monroe. And I'd be saying this to an extent, regardless of who it was. This week's got to be about Alabama and getting your own stuff right. Because, I mean, at this point, I've heard people question, when they got beat by double digits in Bryant-Denny Stadium by Texas, everybody, I mean, the criticisms were loud. I mean, when's the last time someone stepped into Bryant-Denny, and handed Alabama a loss, but especially a loss like that, where it felt like it was larger than 10 points. After that USF win that same year, the following week, actually, I mean, it was like, man, what is going on in Tuscaloosa? And somehow they were able to right the ship, get back to the college football playoff, should have probably made it to the national championship game. And had they been able to, very well could have beat Washington to win it. But this program is not what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Everybody at this point, you'd be foolish not to admit that, but it can still be an elite program. Yeah. It's not performing like an elite program.
The roster's good. I mean, the roster's good. I know I've read some reaction to people in the media, and heck, I'll shoulder some of that, or a small part of it, about why didn't y'all tell us this was coming? Why are y'all hyping the team? This is a good roster. It's a good roster. I'm a recruiting rankings guy. Now, that doesn't mean I consider it a science, and not every player that's a 5-star is going to pan out. Not every player that's a 3-star is bad. I mean, I know that. But recruiting rankings are a really good, solid guidepost. This is a good roster full of good players. And I still believe this team is capable of even getting to Atlanta, even from where they are right now. But this week is like starting over. It's starting over. This needs to be step one. You don't get mulligans, but you do get a restart. And by that, I mean, yeah, you're restarting, but you're restarting 0-1. There's not much room for error. But forget that. Forget the record. Forget the playoff. Forget Atlanta. Be better. Play better. Improve from where you are. Beat Monroe, and then get to the football building Sunday and worry about Wisconsin and nothing else. And that's how you crawl out of the hole. Our biggest win streak, or longest win streak under DeBoer, is just 4 games. But you know what? Win 4. Win 4. We're going to be feeling pretty good about it because it's going to include Georgia. But win 4 in a row again. You've done it before under DeBoer, which included a win over Georgia. But forget Georgia for now. Forget the Vandy offense for now. Forget at Missouri, at South Carolina. Those all sort of games kind of feel impossible after what we saw Saturday. But forget all that and Monroe. Play well against Monroe. Execute the game plan. They're not going to knock you off your game plan, right? Don't help them. And can you believe Monroe's going to come into this game Saturday feeling pretty good about it? They are. They're going to watch the Florida State tape and go, you know what? We can do this. So you got to deal with that. Normally, when you play Louisiana-Monroe and Bryant-Denny, they lost when the bus pulls up. Not this Saturday. They're going to show up and go, you know what? We can shock the world. So it'll probably be a little tough in the early going because they're going to show up believing they can win. So do something about that.
And I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you that Louisiana-Monroe struggled against St. Francis. They won 29-0, but I watched a little bit of that game, and I mean, they had their own fair share of struggles. But also, what that could tell me is they weren't focused on St. Francis. They were hoping Bryant Vincent, he has experience in the state of Alabama, extensive experience.
I'd say the same thing.
So, I mean, that's, I guarantee you, what I'm not guaranteeing is that they were looking ahead to Alabama. I just wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what they were doing.
That running back you're talking about is a 7A player from McGill and Mobile, Braylon McReynolds. Good player. Yeah. He signed with South out of high school and did okay at South and then transferred. But that Monroe team has a ton of Alabama high school talent on it because Brian Vincent is a Alabama high school football coach. And there's just a lot of state of Alabama ties on that team right now. And they got a bunch of players from Alabama who are going to be quite excited about playing in the stadium of the place that told them they weren't good enough to play there.
That's a good point. Last thing I just want to mention very quickly is I personally underestimated the losses of Tim Keenan. I underestimated the loss of Jam Miller, and I underestimated the loss of Jaden Roberts. You know, these are guys that really would have helped as far as the run game, the experience factor. Jam Miller has that home run hitting ability. I think they really wanted to have some explosiveness from the run game. I think that's why they turned to Kevin Riley like they did, because he could provide it with little running room, just the explosiveness in which he plays. So, you know, Jam Miller would have provided that, but also had the veteran presence and been able to do probably a lot more. You know, Tim Keenan, as far as stopping the inside run, at least because I thought they had success running inside. They had success running outside, you know, attacking the perimeter. They had success in just about every way that you could. If you could have started picking away some of those elements, Tim Keenan being a big factor in stopping the inside run, that's one less thing that they're able to do consistently. You can start, you know, honing in on what it is that they're going to try to do, because otherwise, I mean, everything was pretty much open to them on Saturday. I just that's a big mistake that I made. I thought they'd be fine. Should have really thought about redshirt freshman and Jeremiah Beeman, true freshman and London Simmons, Kelby Collins. For whatever reason, I just think he's having a kind of a tough time right now, if I'm speaking candidly. And so I think that the interior of that defensive line is a lot more vulnerable than I was willing to admit a week ago. But we correct and we move on. But I did want to at least acknowledge that to people, that I was very much wrong on that.
Yeah, and I was wrong about. I think, you know, I also underestimated Florida State. I love how they, to give a quick example, they changed their portal philosophy, and I hope Alabama's paying attention, because I think it's a pretty good lesson. 2 years ago, when they, after their 12-0 season, where they got kind of gypped out of the playoffs a little bit, they went in the portal and they signed a bunch of kids with big names, guys who were 5-star and high 4-star guys out of high school that just weren't getting an opportunity. I'll just give one example, but there's a bunch of them. But here's one. They took Sean Murphy out of the portal, the Alabama inside linebacker. Very highly recruited, very highly ranked. He wasn't a 5-star, but he was a high 4-star. Everybody knows him, kind of a national name to all these coaches. But Sean Murphy didn't do anything at Alabama. But so they figure, well, he's not getting an opportunity there. Let's go sign Sean Murphy out of the portal, give him opportunity here. Guess what? Sean Murphy couldn't even get on the field there either. He didn't play for them, and they spent some money getting him out of the portal. They went and got a name out of the portal. Didn't work out. Florida State goes 2-10. This year they go to the portal, and you know they signed inside linebacker this year, a fifth-year player from Memphis that the NFL has no interest in because he's not big and fast. He was a 2 or 3-star out of high school, but he had 350 career tackles. This guy had played 3 years worth of games at Memphis. He's a seasoned college football player. Now, times that by 16, because that's who they signed. They signed experienced seniors to come in to fix this. The right tackle had been a 2-year starting tackle at Ole Miss. You know, now he's not an NFL guy, or he'd been in the NFL, but they went and got experienced, seasoned players like Castellanos. Wasn't his first rodeo either. This guy's been playing a lot of college football. So I underestimated how good they would be. I assumed it would take them a long time to mesh. But you know what? Mike Norvell's a pretty good coach, and Gus is easy for us Alabama fans to kind of poke fun at, make fun. Guy's a good football coach, and he they did a great job of melding those guys together. Shout out to Florida State for sort of figuring out what works for them best in the portal. I hope Alabama's paying attention. Alabama's going to have to sign kids in the portal in December, maybe focusing on older kids who have played a lot of college football and not sexy names.
Yeah, you know, DJU had played a lot of football, but you know, I think your point is production. You know, it's guys who have production and experience. Because outside of DJU, the best example of a guy who had played football but had not been productive, only 1 year, but Malik Benson. That was a big name, former 5-star JUCO player, had some experience in the college level from the JUCO ranks. That's normally a little bit of an easier transition. Had a year of what I would call starting experience at Alabama. He was technically a starter, but didn't get a whole lot of targets or opportunities. And it's like you go pay him a bunch of money, and now he's at Oregon. I don't even know if is he playing for them. I didn't watch Oregon's game.
I don't know if he is, but that's a great example of what I'm talking about.
Big name, example. Yeah,
no production. Squirrel White, Dude already had a 100-yard game against Alabama.
That's right.
And, he wasn't a big-time recruit. And the NFL doesn't like – you got to remember, when you take a senior out of the portal, this is somebody the NFL's passed on. But we're still playing college football here. It's not about the NFL draft. It's about playing college football. They just went out and got a bunch of good college football players, and it worked. And it could win in that league, though the ACC had a nice weekend. I mean, for the ACC, Miami, Florida State, Clemson's good. SMU, watch Duke, I think is surprisingly good. But yeah, I think for my part, in terms of how I missed so bad, not only did I overestimate Alabama, I missed on Florida State.
I think a lot of people did, and that's what I think. I don't think this loss is going to look nearly as bad from who beat them, and that's not even what bothers me, because I do think Florida State's going to end up being pretty good. It's just the things that Alabama could control in this game with like effort and stuff. Is where it was lacking, and that was the most concerning part. Jimmy, I appreciate you hopping on here with me and spending some time. We do have an announcement coming pretty soon. So people definitely need to be on the lookout for that. Probably, I guess, early next week, maybe. Definitely looking forward to that. Appreciate you as always. We appreciate everybody who tuned in, and we will talk to you guys soon.
I may not suit up on Saturdays anymore, but I'm still in the game.
Let's roll.
In here, I call the plays, make adjustments, and lay it on the line. Want to feel that fire, that rush? Then you've got to get in the game. I used to say it in the tunnel, and I still say it now. Let's roll.